The Blue Jewel.
Chapter 5. Part 5. Gosberg, I hope they don't make me angry like the previous ones. Those slaughterers wanted me to stop eating my lambs and my delicious sweets. That's how they ended up with their heads cut off. Arian, hearing that, looked worriedly at the Denka, but he could only smile slightly. Don't worry, it's just a joke. Gosberg shoved the young woman to encourage her to examine the king. Arian walked slowly until he came to where the king was lying, and sat down beside him. The monarch watched intently in silence. Arian began to do what he had done so many times in Caesarea. With one right hand he touched the belly of the monarch and soon found the cause of his terrible ailments. It was a great embarrassment, not rather a terrible intoxication, that made him uneasy. But since the king was a stubborn man, he continued to maintain his diet with so much food load and probably very heavy. That made me worse every day and in such severe pain. He had to get his patient to stop eating, but how? The monarch had ordered the execution of those doctors who had suggested it, and that was the only solution. Arian realized he was in a bit of a bind. And well, dear? The king asked anxiously, do you know how to solve the problem that afflicts me? Arian drew a blank. He didn't know what to answer. The solution was simple, but he couldn't say it because it would seal his fate. The king would cut off his head, Gosberg, this one deservedly, and the Kendali. Perhaps Agnorak could escape from there by not being so close to them. My dear, you don't listen to me. The king insisted again in a tone that was beginning to show a certain impatience with her. Arian had to answer something now. For the king was about to lose his patience. Take my lord. A very characteristic whisper interrupted Arian's dark thoughts, Her Majesty gazing in amazement at someone behind her. Arian turned his head in surprise to whoever interrupted his conversation with the king. It was the Kendali that offered the monarch a cup with a mysterious liquid and emitted a very strange smell that Arian did not know. What is this? Asked the monarch, surprised, looking at what the Kendali offered him. An infusion that the lady has ordered me to prepare to relieve her discomfort. The king took the cup with some reservations, looked at the liquid it contained, and then sniffed the infusion suspiciously. Then he took a small sip. The three adventurers, like the rest of the room, watched with great anticipation the reaction of the monarch, who did not seem to dislike the taste much, since after a small sip of tasting, he drank the rest greedily, in one gulp. Once the tea had been drunk, the king handed the cup to the Kendali and closed his eyes in satisfaction. An expectant silence reigned in the room, waiting for the outcome. After a moment the king opened his eyes and smiled with a great gesture of relief. How does my lord feel? Gosberg asked, who was the only one in the room with courage and enough nerve to address His Majesty, although the Denka was quite doubtful of the effect of the infusion. Unbelievably good! The king exclaimed. It's a miracle. My stomach doesn't hurt anymore. The king was overjoyed, and got out of bed to embrace Arian and Vanus and congratulate them effusively. Thank you, you have made a poor sick man happy. At the same time he gave them kisses and hugged the surprised young women, especially Arian, who did not expect this miraculous recovery from the patient. The entourage inside the hall breathed a sigh of relief. If the king was recovered there was no longer any danger. But Vanus turned back to His Majesty. You should drink this infusion every 6 hours, but you can only eat once a day. Then the gestures of relief turned into gestures of terror and panic. Gosberg almost fell down with fright. Agnorak put his hand to his sword, while the monarch stared at the Kendali. It will be done as you have ordered. This answer astonished everyone, even the Denka, who couldn't help but open his mouth. Besides, you will be my guests while you treat me, the monarch announced as he lay back on his bed. Send for Losgama, who will give you some dignified quarters. Two subjects rushed out of the room to immediately carry out his orders, the king ordering the music to be played again and to be fanned. Everything seemed to be back to normal, and with a gesture he motioned for Gosberg to come closer, which the Denker did quickly, bowing again. My dear and esteemed Denker. Like my father and grandfather, you have once again proved to be a friend of great value. It has been a pleasure, my lord. You should know that de Boek will be happy to know that in your final fees you will have a generous reward for this extraordinary management of yours. I don't deserve it, my lord, for me to serve you. Gosberg thanked the reward with a feigned annoyance that fooled no one. Who was this little Denker who had the ability to get out of the most complicated situations with flying colors? He was a very cunning being, this talking bear with a face that had not broken a plate. Agnorok, on the other hand, breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't know how, but they had saved his ass, at least for the moment. In the town all tranquility returned, the king had recovered his health and good humor, and soon they would leave for his kingdom in the south. The next few days were quiet. Arian found some security within the walls of the villa, where all his wishes were fulfilled as the monarch had ordered. In addition, the king's health had improved so miraculously that after 4 days he was even eating a normal diet, although he always took the infusion after meals.